Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's For Space. Thanks for joining us for today's event, part of the Black Studies at Canada series, Infusing Black Scholarship into Curriculum. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, and we respect the continued connections with the past, the present, and the future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. And here at ForSpace, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge, co-creating daily activities that examine research questions, projects, things happening across the university. Now we're running today's live event to YouTube, live stream to YouTube, as well as a Zoom meeting. So if you're joining us there, comments or questions, just pop those into the chat and we'll do our best to read those out a little bit later. Same with you here in the space with us. If you have comments or questions, just raise your hand and we'll run a microphone around so that everyone can hear. With that, it's very much my pleasure now to pass the microphone over to our moderator for today, Rayana Rima Ikudayo, who is a multimedia visual activist, a co-founder and a chair of Black Lives Matter Sudbury, Black queer cultural curator, and PhD candidate in art history here at Concordia. Rayana, great to have you. Come on.
Thank you for having me. You guys are too sweet. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Fourth Space. Thank you, Angelique. Thank you, Badwa. Thank you, Ian, for all inviting me to participate. My name is Rayana Kundayo. My work is looking at Black arts and activism in the Swakama, colonially known as Sudbury, Ontario. Yeah, activist artist. I'm super excited to be here. I'm also an April baby, turning 30 this month, so this is a great way to usher off the year for me. Yeah, so I'm just going to read a little bit here from our Honoring Our Ancestors. We call upon our ancestors, remembering all who came before us. We honor you, our African ancestors who paved the way for us in the Diaspora and in the motherland, cradle of civilization, Mother Africa. Your bodies, blood, flesh, and bones, then and now, nourish the earth in color, great and small, fresh and salted waters. African, Caribbean, and Black people, no matter where in the world we are, share a common bond of courage, determination, indomitable spirit, and greatness, and we acknowledge our differences and similarities embedded in the bloodline of kings and queens, inventors, warriors, and philosophers. Some of you endured the brutality of transatlantic enslavement, forced to give free labor, built nation states worldwide in bare backs, and still managed to be victorious in achievements. We honor you today and call upon your wounded and triumphant spirits to share this space and bask in our glory of you. All our foremothers, fathers, parents, and relations, we know that you fought alongside Indigenous peoples yesteryear for freedom. So we know that our liberation is tied to the liberation of Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island and the world. We cannot ever be liberated if our Indigenous relations may remain in bondage under tyranny of historical and modern colonialism. We will not let your toil and service to humanity and to Black peoples go in vain. So we carry on in your footsteps, reaching for higher heights, creating memories and deeper prints for those of us here and now, and babes unfertilized yet to come. I'd also like to acknowledge that from 2015 to 2024, the United Nations declared that the International Decade for People of African Descent, and later adopted 2025 to 2034 as the decade to recognize the people of African descent, represent a distinct group of human rights must be promoted and protected. And just last week, the United Nations General Assembly voted to recognize the enslavement of Africans during the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity. I would now like to pass it to Angelique Wilkie to give introductions about everything today.
Thanks, Rana. I'm not going to take too long. More than anything else, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here. This event today closes the year of the Black Studies at Concordia Speaker Series, and I think it is extremely important that this conversation, it's not more important, but I think the idea that we have Black Studies so we can just tick a box and move on is an institutional tendency that I would like to counter. And so having this conversation is extremely important. You know, how do we continue to integrate Black knowledges and Black interrogations into university curriculum? What I want to do as well is just give a little bit of context for the project itself. So it was an idea that emerged during the work of the President's Task Force on Anti-Black Racism, which I chaired. And really for the reasons I just mentioned, yeah, that it not be a box we can tick. If you're doing Chemistry 101, yeah, whereas Black knowledge or Black experience in that interrogation. So it started off as a pilot project. It involved a faculty member, a research assistant, library support, and CTL, Center for Teaching and Learning Support, as well as at the time, materials that were generated by the Black Perspectives Office in terms of racism in classrooms and where is that hidden and held. The pilot project took place over the course of about 2 years, and we created this hiatus year, really with the intention of kind of evaluating what took place, what worked, what didn't, what should we imagine, you know, as next steps. There have been various activities that Ian, who is online somewhere, has piloted along with CTL help. And this conversation here is the culmination of that. So on the basis of the materials that we've already collected from the various focus groups that have taken place, and what I hope will galvanize this conversation, it'll give us enough info to try and develop a protocol, a template that hopefully the university will adopt. I'm going to be quiet now. Your turn.
Thank you, Angelique. So I am very excited to be sitting with you all today to chat, to get into this. So what I would like to do is I'm going to invite all of the panelists to introduce themselves. You can give like a couple sentences about yourself, your work, if you could share your pronouns, and also how you're arriving today, how you're feeling. You can share about your body, your mind, your soul, whatever you were called to share today. I'm going to start with Nohémie just beside me, and we will go around the table this way.
Okay, well, hi everybody. My name is Nohémie Bokuma. I'm a second-year master's student in political science at Concordia University. I'm researching feminist perspectives of AI governance and ethics, and I'm currently an RA for Dr. Christopher Dietzel, who we are working on a research project on AI and dating apps. I'm feeling good, rather good, and I'm very excited to have this conversation with everyone today.
Hello, everybody. My name is KG Gutman. I'm very pleased to be here, excited for the conversation. I'm an independent artist and researcher, and I participated in this project as a role as artist in residence in the intermediate area of studio arts, fine arts at Concordia. And yeah, I'm feeling like I biked here, which is a first in the season, so hopefully the weather will continue for biking.
Hi everyone, I'm Bella. I recently graduated from Concordia, but I participated in this project as a PhD student in the Department of Biology, where I did my research on the benefits of urban nature. My pronouns are they, them, and I am arriving today similarly happy about biking here without a hat or mitts, which felt really nice.
Hi. Sorry, my name is Hélène Brousseau. I'm a librarian here at Concordia University. So I work with the communities around cinema, dance, contemporary dance, music, and theater. And my pronouns are she, her. I just wanted to say that I've been involved in 2 iterations of the project, and the first one was with the Professor Luigi Alamano and PhD candidate Fernanda de Cassia Alves Salgado in a sound for animation class, and the second time with KG Gutman and student Pauline B. Kalomami in the advanced intermediate class. I just wanted to give shout outs to these wonderful folks that I had a great experience with and that were really important for my experience in this project.
Hi, everyone. My name is Magda Konieczna. I'm a professor in the journalism department, and I worked in this project with Noémie and with Wole, who is joining us online. My work is around journalism and democracy and how to engage communities in co-producing knowledge and information. And I'm just really grateful to be here and to have been part of this project and to have worked with Noémie and Wole, and excited to see what the next iterations of the project are.
Excellent. Yeah, of course. I was going to say, Wole, if you can unmute, we'd love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little about yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Oyewole Oladapo. As Magda said, I worked with her as a research assistant on the project, but currently I work as a policy planning and research analyst at a Newfoundland and Labrador Workforce Innovation Center in St. John's. I'm very happy to be here. I spent the past 3 days in Happy Valley Goose Bay, where it felt like minus 26. Oh. But I'm happy to be back in St. John's, where it's sunny today. Thank you.
We are sending you warm thoughts, very warm thoughts. Oh, and Alicia as well. Please, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alicia Wright. I am a current second-year PhD student in the Department of Health, Kinesiology, and Applied Physiology. I'm also part-time staff at the university at the School of Health. My current work for my PhD revolves around low back pain, looking at interventions that are best suited for chronic low back pain, as well as looking at disparities between different populations, be it based on location of residence, as well as ethnicity and race, and how they manage low back pain.
Wow, very impressive. Can we just have a round of applause for all of our panelists? I think they're very impressive people, and I just want to thank them again. Thank you all for sharing a bit about yourselves, and I just want to welcome you again into this space and into this conversation. So what I'll do is we'll go through some of the questions. If you feel called to answer, we have 2 microphones. If you're online, I'm going to do my best to look around and make sure I can see you. But if you're being quiet, I will call on you directly. So everyone's going to get a chance to share. So the first thing we really want to talk about, we're talking about this project, the program, Infusing Black Scholarship, what this means. And I would love for us to think about what happens when foundational sources are white. We know this is very common in academia, very Eurocentric ways, very colonial understandings of how we approach certain things. And so let's begin with that question of what happens when foundational sources are white, if anyone feels.
Thank you. So in general, when foundational sources are white or only legitimize whiteness, it isolates other realities or it labels them as non-existent or as subcategories. And also when foundational sources are white, it allows for whiteness to be the only authority on what blackness is or on what other racialized realities are. In journalism, I'm not a journalist, but I did work with Magda in incorporating Black scholarship in the journalism department, as I understood that our collective reality exists through whiteness, and so blackness becomes erased. And in the research that I'm doing, that is, situated in like AI industry, if you only train AI systems with white subjects or white people, you realize that you make them the default, and so Black people are either seen as an error in terms of how it's being perceived in the system or as non-existent. So I'd say that's how I'm understanding this issue to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can just say a few remarks in my context, which is fine arts and intermedia, performance-based and installation, screen-based works. Generally art making is about identity, about culture and society, about experimentation and individual creativity, but always, in lineages of resonance of what has gone before. So what happens if there's not a very particular attention to giving students and talking with students about other lineages. Not only is their creativity kind of maybe muted or maybe unlocatable, but they also don't get that participation in the resonance of that multiple lineages, because culture, obviously, we draw from what has come before. So there's a historic and a very, very punctuated idea of their voice, how they can be resonated with others in that conversation.
Also, sorry, Bella, I'm going to use you as the breakoff for the mic, so we can just keep one on this side. You can pick whichever. You're the middle.
I get both.
You get to choose.
That's cool. That's cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think to build on both of your points that were excellent. I think when we engage with white foundational sources and often exclusively white foundational sources, we erase other knowledge systems, as Noémie said. And I think when we think about natural sciences, that really limits our understanding of the world. It limits our ability to do science. It limits who shows up as scientists. And it really stunts our ability to develop knowledge and understanding. And I think that all serves kind of this project of, as you mentioned, colonialism, fascism, patriarchy, is the end point of using white foundational sources exclusively.
Continuing to build, I also had similar notes on how it's going to center the voice of whiteness as the norm, where everyone else is othered or secondary or absent. And it's going to have consequences on what is collected, so what is taught, what is cited, what is recognized as authoritative. So if you're not citing these foundational knowledges, then you're not doing your work right, potentially. And in terms of libraries, the collections that we have, students are often being taught that you have to go to the library because those are better sources than if you're finding something outside of the library. And sometimes we have gaps. Sometimes our knowledge systems are not allowing for sources that are other than whiteness, for this question at least, to be easily discoverable. So there are, it's a system also that has consequences.
Yeah.
So I appreciate all that everyone has said, and I won't echo it, but maybe I'll try to build on it by speaking about our own experience in journalism. Our discipline maybe is a little sort of more fluid and in flux than some of the other disciplines that we're talking about, in that we, especially in Canada, we don't have a ton of scholarship. It's sort of more practice-oriented and more kind of looking at sort of criticism and essays, and then also journalistic output. And so I think one of the things that Noémie and Wole and I worked a lot on is figuring out where the gaps are there, because there is quite a diversity of voices, but there are spots where those voices, where the voices are primarily white. And that would be anytime we talk about scholarship, it's much whiter than when we're talking about journalistic production. We have gaps around sort of anything international that's non-Western, which I think was really important for us to work on in the project. And then also around sort of the Black Quebec experience, especially being in an Anglophone institution where a lot of the Black Quebec experience is in French. I think we had a lot of gaps around that, and so I think we worked to sort of try to fill some of those. But it was interesting for me to recognize that there are areas where there's a lot of diversity, but that's certainly not everywhere in our discipline. And so how can we kind of fill in some of those gaps? And you guys were very helpful in that.
Yeah. I would like to go to Alicia and Wole online as well for your thoughts. Why don't we begin with Alicia?
All right. So for me, as a kinesiologist, I've been in the field of kinesiology working actively for over 20 years. And we do exercise testing where pretty much all the normative data tables, or most of them, are derived from predominantly white population. So this prompts critical reflection on their applicability. So to what extent do these normative data values accurately represent Black or other underrepresented populations? So these are the types of questions I often have, because if I'm sitting with my Black or with my Asian or other, nationality or ethnicity client, telling them, hey, your lower body strength is poor. But if we have data tables that accurately reflected their physiological profile, maybe that would be different.
Thank you for that. And Wole?
Yes, if I may piggyback on Magda's contribution, journalism is context specific. Because foundational resources are white, they promote a false idea of the world being a global village. So what happens is, if I come to Concordia to study journalism, by the way, Concordia has one of the best journalism departments in the country, but if I go back to Nigeria, I can translate most of the things that I learn in Concordia directly into the Nigerian journalism context because they are world apart. For example, in Canada, Freedom of Information Act works perfectly if you compare it to the Nigerian context, where if you want to adopt the same methodology, you might not be able to get any story to publish in 1 year. So if foundational resources, foundational sources are white, if there is no accommodation for other realities outside of the West, then it affects practice itself. We are going to be producing a set of students or graduates who are intellectually sound, who are theoretically sound, but who are unfortunately unable to fit into local context outside of the North America.
I think, wow, first of all, thank you all for your thoughts on this question. I really love the diversity of the fields that everyone is coming from. Really gives such a robust look at what it means when we're looking at scholarship from this white perspective. And like, for myself as a student, I think about how when I started in art history, trying to write something, and anytime I wanted to write something Black, it was like, well, you have to base it in this white text because that's the foundation. And how we can kind of rethink as scholars, like, what if the foundational sources that we were building on weren't just white? What if we were looking at other sources or other forms of sources or, other scholarship? And just thinking back to what Hélène was saying about what we have in the library and the resources we have access to, it makes me think back to when I was doing my master's. I was looking at Blackness in architecture, and what ended up happening was the school had no books on Black architecture, so I had all of them when I did my research, and the only reason they realized I had all the books and didn't return them was Black History Month came around, and they were like, where are all the Black books? And I got an email saying we need something for the display, and I had all the books. But this brings me to the next question of what we've already kind of touched on of what if we infuse other kinds of scholarship? What does it mean to infuse Black scholarship, and what are avenues to infuse Black scholarship within the institution or academia or in the kinds of work that we're doing? This time I would like to start in reverse. I'd like to call on Wole first, if you would like to answer that question.
Oh, yes. One thing that the first thing that we first need to acknowledge is that Black scholarship is not homogeneous. When we talk about Black scholarship, we might look to Black Americans, Black Canadian, or Africa. We also look into the Caribbean. We have a lot of Black scholarship there, even in South America, in Brazil, and all over the place. So when we allow diversity, when we broaden sources, we bring realities, we bring alternative realities from other parts of the world, and we are going to be benefiting from perspectives that we will be missing out on if we do otherwise. So I believe it is very good for scholarship. It is very good for practice. It is very good for the world. If we expand sources and expose students and even scholars themselves to sources other than white sources. Thank you.
Thank you. And Alicia?
Yes, so from a research perspective, as a kinesiologist, so we actually had a little bit of this conversation in my class yesterday where we were speaking about EDIA. And one of the points that I raised was that, you know, to see representation. So for example, having Black scholars, and I think to feed off of what Oyewole mentioned, Blackness is not Black American, it's not Black African, it is diverse. So I think, you know, looking at infusing Black scholarship from different areas of, you know, Black cultures, whether it be the Caribbean, you know, Africa's, even, you know, places that we don't think about. We have Black people living in Europe. We have Black people living in Australia. I've been to those places. I've seen them, you know, and I think their perspectives and their voices need to be heard. So if we have more Black researchers, if we have more Black teachers in the elementaries, the high schools, like that's important, because when I look back at my experience as a Black student, always in the, you know, accelerated group, in the high academic group, I didn't see Black professors. I didn't see other Black students. So I think some of the ways is just to diversify the teachers, diversify the researchers, diversify, you know, the sources. I think those are multiple ways that we can actually infuse Black scholarship.
No, wonderful. Thank you for that. Yeah, please, Magda.
Yeah, I really appreciate what both Wole and Alicia pointed out. I think for us, one of the challenges was this project is great, and I was so glad to be part of it, but also recognizing that this is not sort of my context and my background, and recognizing that our department is very white, as Alicia said, and as Wole sort of pointed out, you know, those perspectives are erased, and so I was happy to be able to work with RAs, but I had to reach outside of my department, and I'm glad I did, because I think it worked really well, but really acknowledging, I think, Alicia, what you said, when folks don't see themselves represented, I think we end up having less diversity in the department, in, you know, among our student body, among professors, and sort of in all the parts of who folks are interacting with, and so I think that was sort of a big challenge for us. And I also just wanted to add maybe one thing, which is I guess we did this work last fall, and I didn't immediately teach the class, but then I have been these past 2 semesters, and it's been very interesting to see who engages with which of the content that I don't think I've said this to Nohémie and Wole, but I think I've just seen students speak up in response to the content, who are not necessarily speaking up at other parts of the semester, which has been really, really helpful, and it was great working with the Black Perspectives Office as well to make decisions around one of the pieces that we surfaced offered examples of how harmful rhetoric around Black communities can be in the media, and I really struggled with, should I assign this piece or not, sort of recognizing that I'm not a Black person standing in front of the class. It was written by you know, a very reputable Black scholar and journalist, so I felt comfortable around that, but it was very helpful to talk with the Black Perspectives Office and decide whether it was an appropriate piece to assign and how to sort of introduce the piece even before the students had read it, and then the day that we talked about it, how to say, you know, there's harmful language in this piece, we're not going to echo any of that language, but we do need to talk about it, and folks really engaged with it, and so that was very helpful, and something that I think working on my own I would not have felt comfortable doing, and so I think this project is really powerful in that way.
Thank you.
All right, so I wanted to come back to something that I forgot to talk about, but I think, so, you know, hearing about, you know, having Black students, Black professors, like Black voices represented, it's also in the publishing industry. So when we're thinking about Black scholarship, like the topics that are that are like prioritized are often anchored in the global north, Eurocentric views, the journals that have high citation counts, which will be important for tenure, for all the systems around there needs to be representation at every single level, and that includes editorial boards, that includes peer reviewers. So when we're thinking of scholarship, I think we need to think about the entire system as well. So that just came to mind, but what I had here that I wanted to share was this idea of collections and pedagogy. So in terms of, again, bringing the librarian and the library's perspective, we have a role and responsibility in collection development, so we support curriculum, so profs will recommend books and journals and resources that are needed for class, so those we will get automatically. But then as librarians, we also go beyond and work on collection development, and that's a place where we can have intentionality in addressing topics that are of interest to our students, and the ones that are that we can identify as gaps. And this project has been really great in entering these conversations where I don't always know where the gaps are, and should one individual be responsible for what the collection will be for a full discipline, it's really interesting to kind of decenter the power around those ideas as well. And I'm going to pass it along, but in terms of pedagogy, librarians were also in class, we're one-on-one with students, and I think there is a role to play in infusing critical knowledge into how to evaluate research and sources, and how our role, what our role is in this ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you.
I think going to the question how to infuse Black scholarship, there's like two answers that I have, but the first one really relates to what you said about kind of the whole system requiring the integration, the promotion, and the prioritization of Black voices, which also goes to Angelique's first point about what is the university doing other than checking a box. I think this project makes us reflect on our university. I'm a Concordia graduate. Concordia is cool. But also, like, what are we spending money on? Like, there is no prof in this university that is not crushed under the weight of teaching and research. And you cannot spend the time to infuse Black scholarship into your courses if the default is whiteness, if you do not have any time. And so we need to think about why we are losing Black students at every single level, why Black professors leave more than white professors, why we do not have time as graduate students or professors to do the work that is required to retain those students. And the answer is not in the individual grad students and the individual professors. The answer is in what we are choosing to spend money on, the austerity mindset of our university, and like that is really the core of this conversation. But if we go back to like the practical avenues for infusion of Black scholarship, for the project that I worked on, specifically we chose an introductory level biology course, which is really different than like some of the fine arts courses or journalism courses where we have hundreds of students per class, which makes it extremely difficult to like have a like think, pair, share activity, for example, or like a lot of the kind of active and engaged pedagogy that's so wonderful, but when you're in a lecture hall of 400 people is like very difficult. And so I found specifically case studies that focus on papers that were written and produced by Black authors is like a really nice opportunity, no matter what level of class it is and no matter how many people. A case study where you also talk about the author and show the science they're doing is like a great opportunity to be like, this is a Black scholar, like who is doing real stuff. I think also diversifying our sources from, I had to diversify a lot from like a classical textbook to more popular education, TikToks, YouTube videos, etc., where there are amazing Black scholars doing amazing popular education and science communication that you just can't find in like a traditional or foundational textbook necessarily.
Thank you.
I think in the fine arts context, in the intermediate section, you know, we're just kind of baked into this history here of Western aesthetics, of like symmetry and order, and we don't even have language for it because it's just everywhere in our architecture. And so introducing, you know, Black artists, Black texts on artistic practices. By the way, I worked with Po B.K. Lomami, who did this wonderful kind of spreadsheet of work that their concern also was that Blackness not be represented as monolithic. So there was technology, work on performance practices, work on, you know, ambient landscape. So there was like a really beautiful variety. And I was an artist in residence, so I think I had a bit more freedom to just really be transparent to the students and say, I'm in this pilot project, Po has done this wonderful research, and I'm sharing with you kind of my lack of knowledge and my learning as you learn. And I want us to really embrace this pilot project. So I give them the overview, not just the kind of the content of Po's research. And I think it really solicited, you know, an engagement that was otherwise. We went to, we saw this one video by Coco Fusco and Guillermo Peñas Gomez called The Couple in the Cage. It's very difficult material. And we went to the third floor collections viewing room to look at this video because we had talked as a class beforehand to say, let's support this kinds of conversation. Let's get out of the classroom. Let's get out of this frontal space. And it generated a lot of feedback, a lot of sensitive, you know, so they really had an understanding that they were part of this project as well, which I thought brought out strong emotions, big critiques, well-deserved, and also a lot of peer-to-peer, you know, understanding, listening, and support.
Yeah. Can I actually get you to pass that back this way? No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
So for me, through this project, I was able to interview Black journalists, Canadian Black journalists. And there was one thing that one of them said about talking to Black people even if they don't talk about Black things. So trying to talk to a Black lawyer, a Black accountant, a Black teacher, a Black artist, a Black person, and it not being necessarily about quote unquote Black things. And they also spoke about how we must speak to Black people, not just when things happen to them, but when they make things happen as well. And so it was very interesting for him to say that, to reiterate the fact that Black people exist in all discipline and that they need to be valued for their expertise, no matter if it does speak about Black people or not. And for me, in my experience, I did the Women's Studies certificate at Concordia. And so I had 2 professors who did an excellent job in incorporating Black scholarship. Professor Gada Mahrouz and then Professor Nathalie Batraville, who were both professors who spoke, about Black scholarship in contexts where Black scholarship was needed, like in critical race feminism, or in feminist perspective on culture, but also in topics that did not have to, quote unquote, center Blackness. So for example, in tourism and mobilities, and then in a seminar called Ending Sexual Violence. So those 2 topics didn't have to, but it did value Black scholarship because it was important to them and also so enriching to the students.
Yes. Thank you all for your thoughts on this question. I've just been like making notes of things to kind of, you know, really this important conversation about not only the non-monolithicness of Blackness and the diversity of it, but also just like experiencing it in different forms and in different avenues. And like a lot of what you're saying is making me think about like when you were saying, Nohémie, about like Black things not necessarily being, or Black scholars not necessarily just talking about the Black experience. And like, I was talking to a colleague of mine recently who's doing a PhD, and she was saying that her work is about decoloniality, and everyone's like, well, that's DEI work. And she's like, well, I'm not talking about diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And they're like, no, but it's DEI, because the institution that she's at, they're like, Blackness can only exist in DEI, there's no other space for it. And so really opening that up, the conversation in different avenues. And you guys make me think about Tina Campt. She talks about the Black gaze, and she talks about, you know, really making ourselves comfortable with being uncomfortable in these conversations. And it's just making me think about, you know, how we were talking about like the harmful languages and how we can approach these conversations in the classroom. Because how many times have we heard, I mean, in a Canadian context as well, of professors who've just like read things and said the N-word, and they're like, it's in the scholarship. And it's like, there's ways to meaningfully engage if you absolutely have to use these texts. Or, you know, KG, you were talking about like viewing the video outside of the context of like the classroom, and like really giving people this comfortability or space to like express all these other things that are with it. And that brings me into our next question, which is specifically, you know, for the faculty, and really talking about the courses you've taught. And if you could talk more about like things that seem to be necessary or lacking, but also talking about your process of bringing these scholarships. So I'll start with KG, if that's okay.
I think I want to just speak to a part of the process, the orientation, that was so fantastic. It was one of the few moments that faculty from various departments came together, and we kind of understood the scope of the project, because the next steps were pretty solo after that. But one of the sessions was with Dr. Tennille, if I'm saying that right, Tennille Brown, trauma-informed learning spaces. So, you know, we're bringing in this research, and as a faculty member, how do you facilitate a conversation on systemic racism? Coming from the social location of a white professor, that's, you know, that was my learning, and it was fantastic. And I continue, you know, I'm interested in performance and embodiment studies, and how trauma affects the nervous system, and how we engage in difficult material, how we can set the tone. And she had a lot of really important, I think, tools. And when I did go, it was sort of outside the scope of the project, but I did share my experience with my colleagues in intermedia. And one of the questions was, you know, how do we go beyond just referencing other texts and scholars, and really take on a significant departure, like a really decolonial, how do we really do that, you know? And so one of the tips that she said was really connect the discussions on systemic racism to your learning objectives, so that we are not having a conversation that encompasses the whole of Western history, and really to kind of get people on board to focus, and that the time of learning is to discipline oneself for different levels of learning, have different questions prepared depending on that was helpful for me. And the one question that I thought I would share that was important was, how do you facilitate different levels of learning when perhaps students of color or Black students have so much lived experience and perspective and research, and their peers do not, their non-Black peers do not. And so she really emphasized that, like in the fine arts, for instance, we have this tendency to say, to say this is a making space for young pre-professional artists, and not about the messiness of learning, the intense discomfort of pedagogy, and we're right there in there with you. To pad, to kind of, to make sure that folks who had really material that they felt comfortable with, and then ease into the difficult material and come back, and to kind of sit with the discomfort. So I just thought that was part of the process of being in this project, and it gave me a lot of confidence to to really have more direct conversation with the students that I might have otherwise, panicked and pulled back from. So it's uncomfortable work and it's important work, and I think that was I would suggest, that kind of from the Teachers and Learning Center to keep that support up for not, for white faculty to have this trauma-based awareness, trauma-informed based awareness. Yeah.
I'll just maybe pick up some threads of what various folks have said. I love the idea of feeling, of being comfortable in the uncomfortable spaces, which is very challenging for me, I guess for everyone maybe by definition. But I also really appreciate, Noémie, what you said about talking about Black people or talking to Black people in all kinds of contexts, not just about Black issues or whatever. And that's something I sort of mentioned, that our field is maybe a little more fluid and a little more diverse, but often it is sort of the case studies of, here's Desmond Cole and how he quit the Toronto Star because they told him that he couldn't write about race very much. And that's a powerful story, I think, but also thinking about where are the Black voices on everything else, not just when they're getting fired for being too Black or whatever. And so that I think has been a good challenge for me. One thing I did that I'm still kind of waiting to see how it shakes out, but I think a lot of the voices and the criticism that Noémie and Wole surfaced were around the idea of journalism is that we're contributing to some kind of a societal conversation and sort of in a positive way, but journalism can also cause harms, right? And I think it kind of jumped out at me how much of the criticism was around that, and so I ended up kind of making that one of the options for our final essay for the class, and I'm very curious to see kind of how folks engage with that and who engages with that and what they're citing, and that has sort of challenged me to go beyond just kind of the voices that we found, but to also sort of try to embody it again as not a Black person, but to take seriously the criticisms and how can we bring that into the other parts of our discipline. I think maybe I'll stop there.
No, that's wonderful. I think you guys are touching on some really important stuff about, especially the discomfort. I really loved when you said, KG, the intense discomfort of pedagogy. So I'm like, I'm going to use that. I love that. But also thinking about what you just said, Magda, where are the Black voices? If we don't have them in the institution, then they're outside. But really what we've been talking about of looking at other sources. We mentioned social media. We mentioned, finding the journals where they're at, independent folks, and just really infusing that and bringing all those avenues there, which I think is really wonderful. And this kind of brings us into, now we've talked to the faculty, but on the RA side, thinking about what are things that you accepted and learned about the project, but also how did it influence your own research or your own teaching? So for this, I'd love to start with Wole, if you feel comfortable to share your thoughts.
Yeah, sure, thank you. When I received the call, it was one of the things that I had been waiting for at that point in time. It was when I got to Montreal in 2023 that I realized that I was Black. I lived in Nigeria all my life. I schooled there. I traveled everywhere to other countries, to the UK, other countries, but there is a difference between visiting and living. My cohort I was the only Black in my cohort at Concordia University, and the entire faculty was white, 100%. I was about to leave the department when the first indigenous professor joined the department. So the faculty is not diverse also. So I felt out of place for quite a long time. So when the call came, it was, aha, this is what I've been waiting for. So I wanted to see what's going on here. So I joined, and I was very, very, very happy that I did, because I learned a lot. One of the things that stood out to me was that it wasn't deliberate, that professors were ignoring Black scholarship. We wanted to make recommendations of texts that professors could use, texts by Black authors. That was when I realized that most Black, relevant Black sources were behind paywalls, and they are quite expensive. Most of them are not even visible in platforms where even Concordia Library at that point in time didn't have some of the materials that we recommended to professors at the Department of Journalism. So I realized that this problem, this challenge is systemic. It isn't that people decided not to engage Black scholarship, and that is why there must be a deliberate attempt to also address the challenge. So it changed my orientation, the way I view minority, because I myself became a minority. So the project gave me an opportunity to think about what it means to be a minority, what it means to be different, and that has shaped my orientation, even in the way I go about my work that I'm doing presently, and other research projects that I joined after I finish the RA session. Thank you.
Thank you for that. That's, yeah. I feel like for a lot of Black students, like when we move away to school, or I feel like a lot of us have the experience where you're like, oh, I'm Black now. Like when you leave your community is such like a, yeah. So thank you for sharing that, Wole. I really appreciate that. Noémie?
Yeah, so for me, I think this project was a continuation of my interest in incorporating Black scholarship into my academic endeavors or extracurriculars. In undergrad, I went to Université de Montréal, and in the political science department, I co-created with 3 other people a committee for racialized students. And so we had many activities, we faced a lot of pushback, and so for me, Blackness and being a minority was really tested there. And it was really interesting to have this perspective of understanding how to incorporate it in the journalism department. This opportunity was sent to me by a friend who was in the journalism department and thought that it would match some of the things that I was doing. Previously, before that, I had a radio show with 2 other friends where we were speaking about things about Blackness, but about racialized people as well, and trying to understand the world and trying to speak about news in a way that incorporated Blackness and racialized people. And so for us, that, and for myself, that has always been a practice or an interest of mine. And I think I learned a lot in terms of the journalistic practices. And so it's one thing to incorporate in the learning Black scholarship. It's another to be culturally competent to speak to Black communities or to Black people or to racialized communities. And so in reporting, it's important to have that sort of like understanding of how you're coming into a community and what you're expecting of said community to talk to you about. And if you even have closeness to be in this community and expect things of them. So to me, that was a great learning experience, and also learning about some of the initiatives that are started in other schools. We learned about the Mary Ann Shadd Carey Center for Journalism and Belonging at Carleton University. And so that was really interesting to see how Black journalism across Canada, Black journalists, across Canada are being empowered and uplifted through different initiatives.
Yes, thank you for that. No, this is such an invigorating conversation when we're thinking about, you know, scholarship being behind paywall and not having access to it, but also like what you were saying about like doing all these groups and thinking about the labor that then is on those students often, or the Black faculty or the Black person in the space. And, you know, Bella was touching on funding and where we're putting the money earlier, and the university, and we think about like when I started in the program, there was a big talk about finally having a Black tenure track faculty member in art history. It was great. We hired her. She's wonderful. We love Joanna. If you don't know Joanna Joachim, fabulous. But now one of the things I've often talked to her about is the labor. If she wants to do something that's above the extra mile, for a long time I couldn't work with her, and people were like, just get Joanna to read your research on the side. And I'm like, so now she's doing all her other work, and because I want a Black scholar to read it in my department, she has to go above and beyond in this labor, the addition. And so when we talk about why are there no Black students or Black faculty members, we're exhausted, we're tired, you know, this labor's been put on us, and it's like, what do we do with that? But anyways, also thinking about how humbling this work is, community work and engaging with people. I often think about the amount of times I've misstepped in community and the way I have to be like, hey, leave myself at the door if an affected community is telling me they're harmed, and how we learn to do that. So I really want to commend everyone at this table for like approaching this with this discomfort, but also the openness and understanding of like, it's not always about us, and how we can have these open conversations about scholarship. So thank you for that. But what I want to go to now, you know, we've talked about scholarship and having access to all of these things. I'm coming to you, Hélène, with a couple questions about the role of the library. Just like, yeah, the role of the library, and what your experiences were with the project and what you learned.
Yeah, so I was going to start with the role of the library, but I'm going to start with my experience first,
Please.
after all. So when I first got to Concordia, like 3 years ago, within the first month, I was asked to participate in this project, which I was very happy about, because at my previous work at Art Text Documentation Center, specializing in contemporary visual art, it was very grassroots, and we could do, like, it felt like we could do a lot in our little pirate ship, I would say. And then Concordia was like looking at ways that like I could articulate myself in this project. It's a whole other ballgame of resources and systems. But I like to think that this project kind of shaped who I am also as a librarian at Concordia, because it kind of brought me straight into these questions and these systemic problems that I've been in conversation with, not solving, but like at least trying to navigate through them. So I'd just like to recognize how this project has given me a lot. It's been challenging to even to look at the discovery systems that we use every day, large databases. They don't facilitate the discovery of Black scholars, of Black scholarship, and those gaps are really hard to work with. So, what role can the library help, or librarians? So I've got some notes here. So I see the library as an active partner in teaching, in research, and also in curriculum change. Our role is not only to provide access to resources, which is of course our primary mission, but especially to support discovery and also context and use of the collections. And so I've got a few like big points here. We've talked about collections before, but like how to identify gaps and build collections, again, intentionally to include Black scholarship. And this includes like a range of formats. So I've heard like others talk about like how we have to go look outside of the like quote unquote traditional knowledge spaces to be able to find Black scholarship. So are there archives, films, oral histories, community knowledge? So even accompanying students and researchers in understanding that there are different pockets of knowledges and repositories of knowledges and people and communities that you can have access to. So like finding a way to facilitate knowledge around those places where information exists. A big thing that the library can help is to, and I think that's been very clear in our role as librarians, is to support discoverability and also to be able to share how our systems, like the library systems, archival systems, are anchored in power structures, colonial power structures, and they replicate these systems. So as you mentioned earlier about how AI is replicating these systems, so are libraries. And so how to unpack that and find pathways to help scholars and students find the Black scholarship as well. So sometimes it's there, but it's not indexed. Like, we don't say, oh, this person is Black, this person is white. Like, that's not how things are indexed. So we have to find other ways of adding kind of a layer of knowledge that's absent. We can have an impact also in critical information literacy to help students and faculty understand these systems, how they're not neutral, and explain how exclusions happen. So I was talking earlier about the systems of the publishing systems. So even just unpacking that. And ultimately, I think our role is to support knowledge mobilization. So it's not enough to just have collections and to have those things, live there. We have to support making sure that people have access, that they are used, that they are read. And I think the librarians have a role to play in all these different these different ways of interacting in academia. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous up here.
No, you're doing so great.
Yeah, so I don't know. I just wanted to say this project has taught me a lot, and I think that we still have a lot to discover. The librarian as librarians in these collaborations, I find the model is generative of in so many different ways.
Yeah, no, what you're saying about all of these things about the library is so interesting. Like the idea of indexing, if scholars are Black or white or Indigenous, for instance, is really important and interesting because we think about sometimes how if an author is Black, they just go in Black studies, even if their research has to do with something else, and just having access to that. Or oftentimes, I find for myself when I'm doing research, all the books I need are always on course reserves because there's only one. And so it's having access to different kinds of books, having more of them and that kind of stuff. But different repositories of knowledge is something that I really think about. We talk a lot about who's archiving and whose archives do we have access to, and oral histories versus written histories and that kind of stuff. I would like to go to the next question, but before I do, I did notice, I'm so sorry, Bella, I skipped you on the last question. If you would like to add anything about your experience.
I'll just say that I think probably the main thing that I learned was that if given time and resources, we can do this for literally any course. I think often in natural science especially, professors come and they're like, yeah, this is great, but there's no, it's not relevant for my course. And so we did this with a first year biology course where the learning objectives are things like define a fungi life cycle. And we still found opportunities to incorporate Black scholarship, and it's important to do so. And so I think that would just be my main takeaway is that there is no course in this university that would not benefit from this process. And if you give profs teaching relief, they'll do anything for you. So do it.
Thank you for that. You are so right. But now that we've kind of talked about the project and what you've learned and the takeaways, I would love to ask all the project participants, what worked, what didn't, what were the challenges, excitements, or even if there was any questions or things that came to you that you weren't expecting. Yeah, I'm trying to think who I can start with that we haven't started with yet. KG, would you like to start?
I need a moment.
Oh yeah, please. Everyone needs, that is so fine. You guys can take a moment. Yeah, Bella, please.
I think the prof I worked with, Dr. Carly Zeter, and I were the very first round of this project. And so we did a few trainings with CTL, and there was a few workshops at the start. But they were really focused on classes that had a lot more flexibility in terms of their curriculums and in terms of, as I mentioned before, how many students are in the class. Yeah. And so this class, the class that I worked on, is a prerequisite for like every other biology class. So there's no flexibility in terms of curriculum. It's also taught by at least 4 profs every year. And so it was also really challenging to think about, okay, now Carly uses like the changes that I made, but do all the other profs, like, do they want to? How can we facilitate like a model that's like a little bit more integrated in terms of getting everyone on board and like making changes that are relevant for everyone? And so I think like moving forward, having workshops, because obviously active pedagogy, that's the dream, like that's what everyone's trying to be doing, but having workshops that are more centered on these kind of introductory first year courses that are huge, that are prerequisites with not a lot of flexibility and that are taught by many people, and like having CTL and having the Black Scholarship Office like help us find solutions to that problem would be super helpful.
No, that's wonderful to think about that, of how we kind of bring it in. Even like, that sounds like a very challenging course, but it's so important because, you know, oftentimes when we find opportunities to talk about Black scholarship, it's like one class in one department or like one thing that you have to fight to get into. And then it's interesting when students get to those courses, how often they're so ill-equipped with language or having like certain things. Like, I remember when I started my PhD, I fought to get into a master's class about Black scholarship and Black studies and art history because there was none at the PhD level. And I got there, and I remember one day we were getting feedback from an assignment, and the professor was like, so you can't say the Blacks. Enough of you said it in your paper that I'm going to say it out loud. Don't say the Blacks. And I was like, this is a master's level course, and I'm like one of 2 Black people in the course. And me and the other Black person, we looked at each other, and we were like, I don't know who would, but, you know, stuff like that where it's like, how do we normalize bringing in language like this from the get-go of post-secondary education and all of that. But is anyone else feeling called to answer the question of what worked, what didn't? Wole, I'm also looking at you online. If you want to share, you don't have to, but anyone else? Oh.
Yeah, I can only speak to some of the challenges, but I can't directly speak to what worked and what didn't work, because the project concluded when I was already rounding off my study at Concordia. But I anticipated that some of the faculty members might have some challenges translating our recommendations into practice. And the biggest challenge is that these professors are training students who graduate from Concordia journalism, and they work all over the place, and they are excellent. They are doing very, very, very well. If faculty don't see why we have to infuse Black scholarship in curriculum, in practices, that might be there might not be the motivation there for them to adopt the recommendations. I mean, I look forward to a time when all faculty members will come to the same level of understanding that this project is promoting, that everybody realizes that it is what is needed to be done. Not just for Black scholarship, we don't need to have another kind of project to start saying, let us infuse indigenous scholarship. So if we have come to terms with the need for diversity, equity, and inclusion, all of us will find it very, very easy to implement the recommendations that come out of this very important project. So I know Magda is in the best position to speak to what worked and what didn't. I just make an observation based on my own experiences and what I anticipated the challenges could be for professors implementing the recommendations.
Yeah, and then we'll come to you after it.
Yeah, I really appreciate those points, Wole. I guess maybe we haven't shared with you guys that we did something a little bit different. We, along with working on the course, which I was not I wasn't teaching the course, and I wasn't sure when I was going to teach the course, so it was a little, I didn't want to be like, hey, colleague, here's a syllabus we made for you. So we did do some work on the course, but we also worked together to make kind of an amazing, if I can plug it, Zotero library, thanks to Wole's Zotero genius, that we intended to share across my department, that I didn't know that Zotero had all these abilities to sort of tag things and help with discoverability around, we tag things as scholarship and journalism and various different kind of topics within, also acknowledging that there's not sort of a monolithic Black community. And I definitely don't want to criticize my colleagues whom I love and who are very dedicated to bringing all kinds of different voices into the work that we do, but sort of to, I think, Bella's point around where resources go, everyone is just so pressed, right? So we made the Zotero library, and I'm sorry to say, Wole, I'm not sure that it's gotten a lot of uptake, and so every faculty meeting we have, I'm like, hey everyone, I just want to remind you all that this thing exists, but everyone is sort of squeezed for time, everyone is, it's challenging. It's challenging to accept the discomfort. It's challenging to, I would say our courses are fairly diverse, but there are gaps. And so figuring out what those gaps are is a challenge. And so I think that's something, it's a reminder for me, Wole, that I can do more to sort of plug that amazing resource that you guys made. And it is publicly available on Zotero. I forget what it's called. I realized I should know so that I can share it with you guys. Do you guys remember? If one of you, Wole, since you're at your computer, maybe you can look it up and we can plug it to everyone. But that was sort of, I think, a big challenge for us. And just, again, not criticizing my colleagues, but just acknowledging sort of the challenges around being constantly strapped for time and, if something works, not always sort of reopening and rebuilding. But I think also, as folks have said, a lot of this was really generative for me, and there was a lot that really did work, and in particular, the ability, thanks to the resources from the university, to hire two RAs who are coming from different perspectives and different backgrounds, was huge. I mean, I don't think that I would have been happy taking on this project without that, those perspectives and the resources to support that. So I really appreciate that.
This is great because I can actually build on that. So what I was going to talk about in terms of challenges is where the information lives after. So I was part of two projects, and there's so much work that went into it. There are interesting sources, there are individuals, like when I talked about how sometimes it's hard to identify the black authors, and that needs to be shared because it's a network after that you're building of people that you can be in conversation with through your own work, through your citations, and it's hard to know where the information can live. And I've had these questions with both RAs and profs that I've worked with. Is okay, well, we've got this great spreadsheet that I'm sure is shared with the faculty, but could it be shared beyond that? And if not, well, is it because of a copyright image? And could we try to get those cleared? And is there a space to exist where we can start pooling all this knowledge that is being collectively built? And I'm inspired by a bibliography that I found through this project, by the way, and it's on my subject guide, but it's a bibliography built by over 20 different librarians and educators around the US and Canada about citing Black dance scholars. So that's what it's called, Cite Black Dance Scholars, and it goes back to the 1920s, I believe.
Wow.
And so I've heard before, oh, but there's no one to cite. That's not true. We just have to find them, identify them, and make it discoverable. So I feel like that's one of the things that I'd like to have resources and time to work on more as a librarian, is also how to build these bibliographies and to find time to network with other librarians, other profs, students as well, because in the work of students, there's knowledge that could also be shared with a wider community. So how do we find a way to make sure that all the time and investment here is activated and keeps being activated after? So that's the challenge that I feel after these projects.
Yeah, no, please.
Yeah, I just have one brief point, which is after the research that POBK did, we did share it with the area, and we had I organized a meeting, and whoever had time came, and it's a very obvious point, but we really had such a generative discussion, and there's just so few collective moments where the faculty are fantastic, and they're all of them are doing their own individual efforts, but this was fantastic work that was shared, and then it's just how can we tackle these problems together, which we need those multi-perspectives. So it was pretty solo, the experience with the students, of course, but then how does that then translate into this shared effort between colleagues? Yeah.
No, 100%. I think this conversation on transparency, but also accessibility of the materials, and how do we knowledge share now? Where does it go? Where does it live? How do we let people know about all these things? Because we know they exist. And like you were saying, Hélène, it made me think of this quote by Romare Bearden, an African-American artist. He said, "Black art has always existed. It just hasn't been looked for in the right places." And that's the number one thing we see with Black scholarship, where people are, like you were saying, people are like, oh, well, who would we cite? These people don't exist. This work doesn't exist. And it's we know it exists in these areas. It does. But how do we, bring it, I don't want to say mainstream, but how do we bring more attention to it and, get people to actually acknowledge it? And I feel like this project is a big step in that direction. But I'm thinking back to, what, Magda and Oyewole were saying, where how do we get people to implement it? How do we go to the next level of that? And I know it's a challenge, and we don't have the answers right away, but we're starting to, and we're talking about that. I think that's so magnificent. I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything to that question before we go to the next one. We good? Yeah, okay. But I really want to go to Alicia now. I have a question for you as a someone who didn't participate in the project, but also asking you, what were your observations of all of this? And if you want to share a little bit about your own experiences in the field, and why is this important? This infusion of Black scholarship and having Black scholars, but I'd love to toss it to you.
Yes. So I kind of alluded to this already, but being a child who loves science, that experience was very white world. I was always in the accelerated or the higher level classes from elementary right through to until CEGEP. And I can say generally, I think my experience was good in that I didn't feel Black. So I laughed when Wally mentioned not feeling Black until he left Africa, Nigeria. I didn't feel Black, and I want to say maybe it's because I was naive. I don't know. But I didn't feel different from anybody else, but I was at the top of my class. So it's only when I got to graduate school and when I worked in certain places, when I'm working at the university, in one particular instance, when I, as staff at the university, right before I started my PhD, I had the opportunity to be on the part of the platform party. And I looked around and noticed that I was the only Black person, and I was shocked. And that's when I think I started to realize how much that was always my story. I'm the only Black person on the badminton team. I'm the only Black person playing the trumpet at a jazz festival. I'm the only Black person in calculus. I'm the only Black person in kinesiology. So I didn't really notice that until this point in my life. And now starting the PhD, when I look in my class, I'm one of 2 Black students, and I'm actually, in my current class is a mix of master's and PhD students. So in fact, I'm the only Black PhD student at the department currently, which to me, at this time in life, I think is odd. I think we really do need projects like this because it really causes everybody to reevaluate. It gives spaces and opportunities to start the conversation. I think, a project like this brings us to the right direction, right? We have to first acknowledge the problem. And indeed, it's already been said, but it is systemic. It is very systemic. It is built in this way. So in order for us to see change, we have to shake the apple cart. It's necessary. So I think this project is very necessary. It's very important and it's critical because, for example, I work in a community with kids that are all Black and from various Black backgrounds, and I brought them to Concordia to a football game. And then I brought them to the CC building and was showing them, the pictures on the wall of previous graduates from the 1900s until I think it stops at 1970. And we don't see any Black people at all. But the student turned to me at the time, he was 14 years old, and he said, "Can I come to Concordia too?" And I was shocked. I was blown away that he would ask me that question. But I said, it makes sense that he would ask because he doesn't see himself here in anything that's happening on these walls, right? So I think sensitization is important. Starting the conversation is critical. And making an actual effort, right? Because it's very easy to start the conversation, but we need to do something. And one of the things I've heard throughout the panel is the lack of time. That's an issue all around. I barely have time to breathe. But the effort needs to be made, but the system itself needs to allow for those efforts to be made. I think someone alluded to, maybe giving profs the opportunity to reduce their workload so they can actually work on infusing Black scholarship. That's important, but those decisions need to be made at the higher levels. So if we're talking about we want to make change, we need to give the space and the time for changes to be made. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have time to do something and you're burnt out, what are the chances that you're going to go the extra mile to make those changes and to do that extra research and to do the extra work necessary to infuse that scholarship, right? I feel as though the representation is a big thing for me. And this is why I think it's important that we have these conversations, but also that we have them earlier in life. Like, why aren't we having these conversations in elementary? Why aren't we having these conversations in high school? Like, it's important. We have to go out. We have to get out of the box to bring these conversations to broader levels, I believe, bigger communities, so that it doesn't get lost. So if I look at 2020, when this whole travesty happened with George Floyd, it blew up, and this is where I see everything started from my perspective. But I think we have to keep having these conversations, but then follow up with actual plans to actually do something and not just check the box that, okay, we meet the quota, we have one visible minority on staff, or we have one Black student or one visible minority student. I think we need to do a little bit more than that, but it starts with conversation and acknowledgement that the system is part of the big problem.
Thank you for that, Alicia. That was so well said and importantly said. It makes me think about, how we shy away from these conversations in the academy. And even like, why don't we have these conversations earlier, like you're saying? Like for myself, my background's in architecture, and I didn't know that 0.2% of licensed architects in Canada are Black women. And so I went in there being like, I'm going to be an architect and it's going to be great. And then I hit a point where I was like, why can't I name a single Black architect or even a Canadian Black architect? Anytime we talked about Black architects, they were within an African context, and like just acknowledging that this exists here, but also what are the realities of people in these fields? Like, yeah, I still want to be an art historian, but knowing the lack of attention to Black scholarship is important for us to prepare ourselves to get into these fields, into these spaces. So thank you so much for touching on that. I think that was something that's really important for us to say. But also what you were saying, touching on the moment with George Floyd and everything else surrounding that, can we talk about Black scholarship outside of these moments of heightened rupture, outside of, why do we only have to talk about Black people when someone is killed or when something huge happens? What does it mean to have these conversations outside of that when Black people are actually at a point of, I'll say resting with my air quotes, because are we ever able to rest? But what does it mean to have these conversations when people aren't feeling guilty or pressured or all these things? What does it mean for us to look at that? And so with all of that, we're having these big conversations. This really brings me to, where do we go from here? What are the next steps? What are our hopes of the outtakes of this project? And I would love for us to start there. This is for all of the panelists. If anyone feels called to start first, I won't point fingers at you because I know you've been here for a while and you're doing great. But yeah, where do we go from here? What are our hopes? Does anyone feel called to share? Please, Nohémie.
I can start.
Yeah.
I think this project needs to expand to other disciplines. So I work with Magda in the journalism department, but I'm in political science, and this is not a project, to my knowledge, that has been initiated, and it's so needed, especially in the grad school. I think there was one class where we spoke about Canada at large, its institutions, and there was 1 week where we addressed race, gender, and LGBTQ plus communities. And so I think
in 1 week.
In 1 week. And every week had a presentation, and I had chosen that presentation. So it's a lot to cover in just 1 week. And so I think for specifically the poli-sci department, I'm not sure how it goes in the undergraduate program, but I know that in the master's program, at least, there is a need for that. And there's a need for Black scholars, Black scholarship, in understanding that it's so much more diverse than just things that are happening to Black people. I know at McGill, there's a scholar, I think her name is Deborah Thompson, who speaks about race in political science, but she's probably maybe one of the only ones that I can quote right now that I've read in the poli-sci department. So I think there's definitely an importance in speaking about these issues or having a project like this in other departments.
Yes.
I don't know why I hadn't thought about this before, but can we find a place to put all our resources? I love that you found that syllabus and you put it in your subject guides. I wonder if I could ask the journalism librarian to put our Zotero library there. But I wonder if there's a way, and I'm looking to you because, yeah.
Please welcome Angelique back to the panel.
Hi. I mean, I guess I could kind of be over here somewhere, but I don't really want to. I don't really want to intrude. What I can add without, and I don't know if this is not yet Q&A, so what I will just say is that there is, as part of the recommendations as well, and something that I continue to work on as special advisor, is the Black Knowledges Hub, which is a project that is in development at the library. It was much more ambitious beforehand, but lack of resources is clearly forcing us to become much less ambitious. However, part of my desire is to make sure, there's a very ambitious word for a non-ambitious project, that the outcomes of the Infusing Black Scholarship into Curriculum efforts actually end up being centralized, that there's a page of some sort on the Black Knowledges Hub that might be, discipline, it's discipline specific. And it can't, it's not a website, it'll be a web page, but at the very least that be able to list resources or give the links that take us somewhere else. Potentially, I think also include resource people. So if there are participants who are willing to be, in conversation with somebody else who wants to do the project, or a kind of buddy system, to not say full-blown mentorship, but just people who have experienced it. I feel like those are resources that are extremely precious, and there's not enough of that in the university. I'll stop there. There's much more I can say, but I want to hear you all instead.
Thank you, Angelique.
Thank you, that's great. So hopefully our Zotero library can live on. I also just want to say I unfortunately need to run to get my kid, but this has been such a great discussion, and I really appreciate also just coordinating this conversation beyond kind of having done the project, but then to talk with other folks who have been also engaged with it. So thank you so much, and I apologize for.
Thank you so much, Meg. Not to be dramatic, but let's give Magda a clap. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. Yeah, please, Bella.
I think if we're talking about dreams for this project, I think it definitely needs to continue. Like Noémie said, it needs to be in every department. It needs to be more than one class a department. If we're talking about the history of Black protests, Concordia, we have a responsibility. This is our history. It is the least we can do to dedicate these resources. I think also working on touching on your point, workshops for professors in terms of how to approach these topics, in terms of how to do pedagogy surrounding this, and also thinking about how to move this past professors who volunteer. Speaking about burnout, speaking about I wonder how many professors volunteer to do this that don't have an axis of marginalization, that aren't already over their service hours. Thinking about how to incorporate all professors in a department and bring them to more of a common language, like you said. Those would be my dreams for moving forward.
Situated in fine arts, a lot of the students that I work with don't have a lot of like traditional research skills. So the de-Googleization and, you know, to work with Hélène, which was such a positive experience. I think that's just one element in the mix of, and also I would say, you know, a lot of my colleagues aren't formally trained as researchers either. We're you know, incredibly self-skilled, but there's a way in which I can see that workshops in not only pedagogy, but researching and is so so important, and also, you know, add to that AI and how students are really leaning in these kinds of awareness. And yeah, I think just to say, in the student body that I worked with, they're just so informed, like, and so kind of interdisciplinary. I think bringing in that level of student consultation would be, I think, so. I taught the undergraduate level, so I'm talking about undergraduate folks. I would love to see that energy and brightness, because it's already happening in the classroom, of course, but maybe more on a systemic level, that kind of consultation. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I thank you for that. I'll give Wole or Alicia a chance. I know you're on Zoom there. If you want to share any thoughts of next steps, you don't have to, but if you are called to share.
Yes, I agree with all the perspectives shared so far. I also believe it is important to continue to monitor and assess the uptake of this idea, the implementation. I know Concordia administer a survey, student experience survey. I think this is one of the things that this is a tool that they can use to assess, ask professors, how many of you are now engaging Black scholarship in your courses? Students, are you exposed to Black scholarship? How diverse were the sources that you were exposed to in your courses? I think this kind of evaluation will serve as a feedback mechanism to professors and to the university community at large, so that we can assess the progress that we are making from time to time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Did you want to? Yeah, please.
I was just thinking, like, obviously it's been said in kind of an undercurrent way, but to just express and galvanize the energy and the excitement of what the potential is for this project. And I think Hélène was saying that, and how much it's touched me, and I'll just give a very quick example, which I think touches on what Wally just said around implementation and different ways of knowing and different ways of organizing knowledge, not just the sources themselves, which is one of the sources that we talk about in performance studies is a American artist, black artist named Pope L, and he has a whole body of work around crawling, and just that metaphor of breaking the vertical systems of knowledge and rational categorization and being on the ground embodied through landscapes, attracting publics and being close to all kinds of intelligence from the ground up. It's just a lovely example, I think, of we're not just shifting, hopefully, that this work is not just about shifting planting in sources, but we're really gathering publics, we're really working on ways of knowing in a different way that influence I think the university and systems of organizing in a dynamic, needed, positive way, as opposed to this top-down, dominate over. That's not knowledge production, right? Knowledge production is on the ground, decentering, mastering something, and really being in a relation and exchange. So I just wanted, it's so exciting and humbling to be part of it, and it has just such wonderful potential. I just wanted to underline that. I know we're all feeling it, but
no, thank you for that sentiment. It's really magical as someone who wasn't participating in the project to hear you all talk about it and see all the outcomes from it. It's truly beautiful to see this like really important foundational work. But Alicia, if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw you. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Please share your thoughts.
So I think we're doing a great job just by where we're at right now. One of the next steps, I agree with what pretty much everyone has said, is we need to infuse this into all the departments, in a systematic way, so that we can actually then take time to evaluate. Are we seeing what we want to see? So Wally spoke about that. That's my language. We need to actually evaluate what we're doing. Does it make sense? How are people receiving, the infusion of Black scholarship? From the science perspective, it's a bit different in terms of sources. So our sources are predominantly Black, or white rather. Research has been done on predominantly male white populations, some female white populations. So it's a little bit deeper than just infusing, Black teachers and so on and so forth. We have a lot of work to do in the science field, but I think promoting Black education in the sciences is one of the things we need to do, and I think we do that by starting early. Concordia should be making partnerships, I think, in elementary schools, having, visits to the elementaries, to the high schools, so that students can see themselves at that level. They can dream to be a scientist. They can dream to be a kinesiologist. And by doing that, it creates a little bit more awareness. For example, in my research, one of my projects, I'm looking at chronic low back pain management in white and non-white populations. There's like no literature on Black populations. I had to pivot and look at the States and what we found in the States. And even then, it's often Black and Hispanic, right? So we have a lot more work to do on this end from my perspective, but I think if we just go at it one step at a time and get out there and also engage in conversations with the Black students and keep those conversations alive to hear what do they want, and not just the students, but also the teachers, also the staff. I think these are ways to kind of, continue the work and see some change, some valuable change.
Thank you so much for that, Alicia. I think that's a great note to open it up to the audience for a Q&A if anyone has any questions that you would like to ask our wonderful panelists today. Calling to the community.
Also, those of you joining us online, if you have any questions, you can put those into the chat and we can read them out. But here in the space, just raise your hand.
Oh, we got a question over on this side.
I'll bring this microphone over.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. My name is Hepta Deland, and as I look at your topic, I start to ask myself about the lack of infusion of Black scholarship into the curriculum, and then I ask myself, what, if we don't have infusion of Black scholarship into the curriculum, then what kind of Canada are we building? And then in terms of Concordia, I ask myself, I remember the computer riot of 1969, and it took 53 years for Concordia in 2022 to make an apology. And so I'm also asking myself, has Concordia healed from that experience? And so while you look at the infusion of Black scholarship into the curriculum, this is probably also an area that might need to be addressed, because sometimes it's not talked about. It's just shoved under the rug. So we do have a lot of work as Black scholars to do, and I thank you for bringing this to the forefront.
Thank you so much. Anyone want to respond? Oh, we got another one over here.
Coming back.
Yeah, thank you to all our panelists. As I'm hearing, like, infusing Black scholarship, pushing against these settler colonial systems is hard work. So my question is about self-care, more so directed at the Black panelists, but doing this work, how can you ensure that you are doing it sustainably, and how can you ensure that you are taking care of yourself at the end of the day?
That's a wonderful question. Please, Noémie.
I don't know that I have an answer for that. I think that's a question that you're continuously asking yourself as you're doing that kind of work. I think this experience, at least for the RA-ship, was a great experience in terms of getting to speak with with Black Canadian journalists, so in Quebec and across Canada, in both the French speaking world and the English speaking world. So that has been very insightful into learning, and I mentioned that I'm not in the journalism department, so that was a learning experience for me too, getting to learn about that world as well. I will say this is probably one of the most pleasant experiences that I've had in terms of like working on Black scholarship. When doing the work that I did at UDM and Université de Montréal, in undergrad, creating the committee in political science, in the political science department, I'd say that's where the question around self-care was asked many times because of the pushback we had of creating that committee. So I'd say staying connected to your why. Why are you doing this? And who is it that you're looking to serve? Oftentimes you'll get pushback from, mostly it was white students, and sometimes it was white people that didn't go to our school who were commenting on the creation of our committee. And so you have to understand that you're not answering to them, you're answering to the Black and racialized students who do need that space and who have been asking for that space for a long time. So I'd say mainly remembering your why and the people that you want to serve and staying in community with them.
Yes. Thank you for that, Noémie. Wole, Alicia on Zoom there, if you would like to add anything, just want to give you the space. No pressure, but if you feel called to. No, we're good. Okay. What I will say, oh yeah, Alicia, please go.
Honestly, I echo what Noémie said. Just remembering the why is going to be the critical thing. I believe it's for me anyways, from the research perspective, it's just part of my work right now. But it has made me more conscious of the work that I would like to do as part of my major works as I move to, once I finish my PhD, postdoctorate work, building my own lab space, if that's what I end up doing. It just has made me much more conscious of the things that are lacking in this area. It has made me encourage my Black community to get involved in research, because we need to hear you. We need to assess you. We need to have data on you so that when we're doing things, or when we're saying your blood pressure is bad, or we're saying this score is bad, it's based on the proper physiological data.
Thank you for that. What I was going to say is boundaries. My new favorite word this year in 2026. Boundaries. I did not know her before. Protecting my peace, protecting my rest. Right now I've stopped responding to emails on the weekend, which is crazy because everyone's losing their mind if I don't respond to my emails on the weekend. But it's like, That's my self-care, giving myself those 2 days of rest, giving myself that time to nurture. Our bodies need rest. I'm a big proponent of Tricia Hershey and the NAP ministry. If folks are familiar, rest is resistance. But I only realized this year that I wasn't actually embodying it. I was just saying it. But I'm like, what does it actually mean to rest? It's not like I'm thinking about things or I'm panicking or I'm mentally responding to emails or I'm doing one little thing. Rest is like a whole body experience, and how can we embody that? Yeah, but it's a learning journey and being kind to ourselves. We do what we can do, but someone once told me that just being Black and existing, I'm a miracle. And I'm like, I live by that. I'm a miracle just being here. We are miracles, and I think that's special. Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, please. Can we get the microphone back, please? Thank you.
I'm sitting here. I'm usually the first one to volunteer for people who have come to know me. It's given me a lot of food for thought. I'm a master's student, and in my department, we are 2. And when I look around and I see, and I'm looking for people that look like myself or resources that someone I can just say, hey, can you guide me here or there? Could you give me a reference? Could you tell me, how do I address this type of subject matter? I'm in design. I'm thinking about innovation. I attend the sustainability conferences. I walk around. I go to other departments. I listen to PhD oral defenses just to educate myself, just to know how to speak, what to ask, how to present, how to even number my slides, little things like that. And so as I sit here and I'm listening to you, and I'm being fed. And my question to you is, how does one navigate, or better yet, what would you recommend for students who are starting off, particularly in their first year, from the master's level to the PhD level, and saying, hey, this is where you should go. This is how you should speak. This is the foundation of the school. This is who we are. Here are resources and that kind of a thing. How do you address time, care, resources, scholarship? I'm asking a lot. But how do you address that, particularly in the first year? Even if from someone who is young to someone who is a mature student, how does one navigate? What would you recommend?
Ooh, that is a wonderful question. I'm gonna look at our panelists, see if anyone wants to jump in on this nugget. Yeah, please, Noémie.
In my experience, so both of my parents did not do undergrad studies or did not do a master's studies. I've been really fortunate to have friends who did a master's degree before me, and that's who I reached out to. I think there can be better work in either departments or at the university level to help students figure it out, because had it not been for some of my friends, I would not know what to do. I'm in the thesis proposal portion of my master's degree at the moment, and I recently had a conversation with my friend asking her, I'm not sure what to do, please help me. And we spent an hour just listing out how to go about it. But again, this is someone who's just finished her master's degree and is doing her PhD, and that's someone that I could reach out to and ask for help. I think there is some centers in the school. I think there's the NULA Center, if I'm not mistaken, at Concordia University, that can provide help and recommendations to students. When I was doing the Women's Studies certificate at Concordia, there is like a library where you can go and ask many resources. We had contact with the librarian, so we were able to know what her job was and also how she could help us. But I think I relate to you in terms of trying to understand where to go and what to do. So I'm not sure that I can provide advice, but I can just relate to your question, especially at the grad level.
Yeah, please, Hélène.
It's hard not to preach for my for my gang, so I would say start at the library. We're a central service of folks that are happy to help, to listen to where you're at. So for a first-year student, I think it's a good place to start as well. And we like to search, so like we like to find places where we can refer folks. So there's the Ask Us desk at the library here, and we just take any question, and if we're not the right place, we try to help students figure out where's the next step. And I think that's important, is to find a place where people will listen to what's happening and where you're at. And like, we're not always the answer, but at least we can try to coordinate or try to find the place where you need to go. We're in contact with students and faculty and other groups. There is so much offered at the university, be it through the Student Success Center, the library, the student groups, and sometimes it's overwhelming trying to find where to go. So I would just keep in mind, as any entry-level student, that the library is a central service that's department agnostic. And yeah, the Simone de Beauvoir library is great, but the Concordia Library is another entity of folks that can also help. There are many different places within the departments and outside of the departments. So yeah, I think that's a place to remember as well.
I can also relate to this as just feeling totally lost in like what even is grad school. And it's shocking how little information you can get about things like research proposals off of Concordia websites. I would say that there are some departments that have graduate student associations. Biology is one of them, which is just a bunch of grad students hanging out and trying to make events and workshops and whatever else people are interested in, trying to form community. And that is really fun, but also those are people who are so happy to answer your questions because they are also grad students. And I'm pretty sure every grad student's dream is to just save the next grad student the headache that they just went through. That's like the best thing ever when you can achieve that. And I would say also most graduate programs have graduate program directors. It's not always obvious who your GPD is, but those people have teaching relief. They're professors in your faculty, and they have teaching relief to help you navigate grad school. You are entitled to make appointments with them and ask them questions about how to do grad school things, but also to talk about if you're having problems or challenges with grad school in general or specific people in your department. And so go to your GPD's office, ask who your GPD is. They want to help you also. They sign up for that role. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes, if I may add from here.
Yeah, go
Yes, I want to also mention one of the things that I found really, really helpful is if you are an international student, like I was, talking to your ISO advisors is really, really, really helpful. Those guys are helpful. They can direct you, they can connect you to resources, to whatever question you bring to them, the one that they don't have answers to right away, they point you in the right direction. So that is one great resource that Concordia has put in place, especially for international students. Another thing that I found really, really helpful was graduate school workshops. I attended many, many, many of those workshops on different subjects, and I find them really, really helpful. So if you need direction, you need to find something, just look around. You can also talk to professors. That worked for me so well. I talked to a lot of professors. Many of them are open. Many of them are helpful. Many of them are willing to give you a reference. They are willing to go the extra mile for you if you build the relationship with them from the outset.
Thank you for that, Wole. I think also, I'm like, we have a question over there after, but I think also find your community. I know it's hard, but once you start to tap into it, like, I think also not just your academic community, but leaning into like your community. The amount of times I've had a paper and I've just like called my friends who aren't even in my program and being like, let's all read this together. We are collectively doing this together. My PhD has become, it's community-based, but it is a community effort. The amount of people who are like, this is our PhD now. I'm like, we're in this together. So I'm like, really lean on those people as well. I think that makes it a little bit less painful. I mean, not to be, I'm like, you can always email me. I know I don't know you yet, but I will know you. And I think this will be our last question just here in the back because we're running out of time.
It's a quick one. Oh, I'm so shy. I had a comment and a question. Just like really great question we got before about like what does it mean to speak in a particular way in academia and like wanting to, you know, conform to a specific kind of standard. And I think part of, at least what I feel, part of infusing Black scholarship into academia and also thinking about other knowledges, like Indigenous knowledges as well, the idea of like professional standards is so tied up in whiteness. Yeah. And when we're thinking about infusing Black scholarship into curriculum, we have to be cautious not to whiten and not to hold those standards. You know, like we get knowledges from different places, and those sites are really beautiful. We wouldn't want to, you know, whitewash those things. And so, yeah, I just wanted to mention like being professional is not a thing.
That shit's fake.
Yeah, it's so fake.
Don't do that.
It's so fake. And I'm a doctor now, so I can say that.
Yeah, you are. Jasmine just defended
I
like
did.
literally 2 weeks ago, so we're like.
Thank you. My last question, I'm glad I get to be the last one, is for Rihanna. Rihanna, I'm sure all of you know, Rihanna does amazing activist and like so much work outside of school and outside of the university. And I guess I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the strategies that you see that you've implemented like outside of the institution that you feel have been applicable within the institution, and other ones that you feel you're like, I don't think this needs to be here, and that's okay. And like, I just wanted to hear your reflection and like maybe how that could apply to like Black scholarship. Like, how much are we trying to bring in, and how much is it okay for things to be outside as a way to safeguard and protect Black communities outside, you know, in general. So I just wanted to hear what you have to say. That's a hard one, sorry.
No, but it's a great question. I think it's funny, when I started this PhD, I was like, I'm gonna do this PhD to prove to people why PhDs are nonsense. Yeah. And in the process have found so much other tumultuousness in the journey. But I'm like, what I bring in from community is like the compassion and patience I try to bring to everything I write and my approach, where I'm like, also being like, I'm like, I don't have to do this. And I keep trying to remind myself, where I'm like, as much as I want this PhD and I want to do this thing, it's not going to be at the behest of my character. And I really like, again, leaning back into the Nat ministry, I read something where it was like, what does it mean to finish full? What does it mean to finish whole? And that is something that I've gained from community, of how I approach, and also remembering like, I'm community made and community born in how I do this. And that's something I shouldn't shy away from. And that's something I've been trying to like say when I do, you know, my talks and things like that, where I'm like, you know, when we talk about professionalism, when I first started, I was told I was a bad writer and I wasn't academic enough, and everything, like how I present is very like, today I have notes. I don't often have notes. I talk from my head. I'm very passionate. I want to speak from my heart. And I was critiqued for that. And I was like, yeah, I understand that. But then I remembered, I'm like, this is who I am. And I want to be unapologetically myself. And that's something I bring from community. It took me years of being in Black community to be like, even how I arrive as a Black person is okay. There's no, this is Black, this is not. How I arrive as a scholar, it's not this and that, is or not. There's so much like melding of this. And so I really just say like, I bring that from community, and wearing, we show up how we can, we show up in ways that we are, and I try to embrace everyone how they show up each and every way. Even sometimes that's not showing up at all, and that's okay. And I think we really have to normalize that in the academy. So I'm just like, I just do this being kind to myself, and I try to remind myself also, I'm like, these systems weren't built for me. So as I struggle and I fight and I sit here and I'm like, am I meant to do this? I'm like, these systems weren't, I'm literally fighting through things that weren't built for me. And that's okay, but taking that journey with, it might be tough, but I'm resilient. Don't want to be, but sometimes we have to be resilient, and I'm gonna persevere because of my community. And I'm just like, even though we are sometimes writing alone, we're not alone. Look at all the people in this room who've been talking about, you know, the importance of infusing Black scholarship and leaning on one another, and just like, how do we do all these things together? We all want it to be something better. So, anyway, I hope that answers the question. But we are at time, a little bit over, I apologize. But I did just want to take a moment to, again, thank all of the panelists for being here. If we can give them a round of applause and just like thank them for their time. Thank you all so much for sharing your wonderful. Oh, stop! Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, Angelique as well. I am actually going to invite Angelique back up for some closing remarks as well.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just it's in a way on a matter of principle, because yeah, this closes a year of Badawa working like an absolute lunatic to get all of this possible. Ian, who's online somewhere as well. This would not be happening without their help. And yeah, it's important to have witnesses, so thank you for being here. And I mean that literally, you know, I mean literally and figuratively. To all of you who have thought and reflected and been willing to come in here with notes, I thank you deeply. I cry. I'm not ministry, man. I'm tired. Well, this is years of work for me, right? So I feel like it's important to acknowledge that out loud. I'm not going to stop yet, but I can't do it alone. So I will be sure to call on you all in various ways, because, yeah, it can't stop here, right? I mean, it's clear there needs to be some form of something that moves beyond what happens in this room and goes back upstairs. But I can't carry that alone anymore. So this is not to make this about me by any means, but it is about acknowledging, again, community, like you're talking about, right? So, and that community is multi on all fronts. So I will holler, because I can't not. And this is only the first iteration of the Black Studies at Concordia Speaker Series, and my quiet hope, again, you know, these things need to move beyond an individual. So this is also an invitation. My quiet hope is actually that next year it be Black PhD students. Because there are more of you here than is acknowledged, and you all have shit to say. And I think that, you know, in the interests of pulling Black scholarship and Black knowledge to the surface and giving that validity in our institution, I think that's where it needs to sit next. Thank you very, 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 very much. An enormous thank you to Doug and the team for, yeah, the ever welcoming welcome. This doesn't require, you can turn us all off. Bye, Zoomers. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. There's food in here and stuff to nibble on, so do that.
Thank you, Angelique. Thank you, everyone else joining us online. We're going to close up our Zoom and live stream now. We did just make a playlist, though. You can watch all the Black Studies at Concordia videos on our YouTube channel. You can also revisit and share them all weekend. All right. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Also, if you have any feedback, our website, concordia.ca/4, there's a contact page with a suggestion board for event ideas or any feedback for what we do here. Help us help you. All right.